It started like any other quiet Thursday morning for Maya Thompson. She was walking her golden retriever, Duke, through their tree-lined neighborhood just outside Atlanta. The sun peeked through the clouds, birds chirped, and kids were waiting. At the bus stop with sleepy eyes and backpacks hanging off one shoulder. Duke had been limping for a couple days, nothing too alarming, but enough for her to worry. So Maya decided to take him to a nearby animal clinic that had recently reopened. Under new management, she didn't think twice about it. But sometimes, the most normal days can take the darkest turns. The clinic was just 10 minutes away. Mall, tucked between a hardware store and an old bakery that still smelled like cinnamon rolls by noon. The new vet had only been around for a few weeks. His name was Dr. Lewis. She hadn't met him before, but the clinic had decent reviews, and that was good enough. At least, that's what she thought when she walked in. From the moment Maya entered the waiting room, something felt ... off, not just the sterile smell of antiseptic or the flickering fluorescent light overhead, was something deeper, something in the way the receptionist hesitated before looking up, something in the awkward smile she forced when she saw Maya standing there, holding Duke's leash. "Do you have an appointment?" the woman asked, eyes darting quickly between Maya and Duke. "I called this morning. They said 10:15 was open," Maya replied, her tone polite but clear. The receptionist nodded slowly. "Right, Kay. Just have a seat. Dr. Lewis will be with you shortly." She led Duke to a chair in the corner and sat down. Noticing the way another pet owner across the room subtly shifted in their seat, just enough to put distance between them. Maya had felt it before. Not often in her neighborhood, but still enough times to recognize that cold, quiet discomfort. The kind that had nothing to do with her dog. About 10 minutes passed before the vet finally came out. Dr. Lewis was in his early 60s. White hair buzzed short, shoulders squared like he had some kind of military past. His coat was crisp and clean, and his boots a strange choice for a vet, looked polished enough to see your reflection in. He called Maya's name without smiling. As she stood, he stared not at her, but straight at Duke. "Let's go," he said flatly, holding the exam room door open. Inside, the room was chilly. Dr. Lewis didn't ask about Duke's symptoms, right? Away. He didn't even say hello. Instead, he turned his back and started rummaging through a cabinet, muttering something Maya couldn't quite catch. She explained Duke's limp and how it seemed to get worse during walks. He didn't respond. He just knelt beside Duke and started examining his leg roughly, without warning or a soft touch. Duke whimpered. "Hold him still," Dr. Lewis snapped. Maya crouched to comfort her dog. "It's okay, baby," she whispered, stroking his head. Her heart was already beating faster. Dr. Lewis looked up, not at her, but through her, like she was furniture. Then, under his breath, but loud enough for her to hear, he muttered, "Figures." Maya froze. "Excuse me?" He didn't answer. Just moved to Duke's other leg, but the tension in the room thickened like fog. It was in his tone, his posture, the way he handled Duke, like he didn't care if it hurt. And Maya started realizing, this man wasn't just cold or impatient. There was something else. Then he made a comment, quiet, but not quiet enough. "Surprised you didn't bring in a pit bull," he said with a smirk. That would have made more sense. Maya stared at him, stunned. What's that supposed to mean? He looked up, finally meeting her eyes. Nothing, just saying. Some breeds are more typical. It wasn't the words alone, it was the way he said them. The smug expression, the venom behind the smile. Maya had grown up learning to pick her battles, to stay calm, to choose her words wisely. But this wasn't about pride or anger. This was about Duke. Her dog was trembling, confused, and in pain, and she wasn't about to let him be handled by someone like this. "I think we're done here," she said firmly, reaching for Duke's leash. Dr. Lewis didn't move. Instead, he stood up slowly, crossed his arms, and said something that made her stomach drop. "You people are always so sensitive, always playing the victim." Maya's breath caught in her throat. She pulled Duke close and turned to leave, but just as her hand reached the door, something caught her eye. On the counter, behind the vet's laptop, partially covered by a clipboard, was something that didn't belong in a professional clinic. A small badge. It wasn't veterinary issued. It was military. And next to it, a patch, red and white. A symbol she had only seen once in an article years ago. A hateful symbol. One tied to a dangerous underground group. Her heart started racing. She took Duke and left without another word. But outside, her hands were shaking. She sat in the car for a few seconds, trying to process what she saw. The comments, the patch, the aggression. And then she made the call. 911. What's your emergency? Maya took a breath. Hi, I need to report something. I just left an animal clinic, and I think the vet might be dangerous. What happened? Next would shock everyone. Because what Dr. Lewis had hidden behind those clinic doors wasn't just bad manners or prejudice, it was something far worse. And Maya's phone call would unravel it all. Maya's fingers trembled around her phone even after the 911 dispatcher told her help was on the way. She sat motionless in the front seat of her car, one hand stroking Duke's head as he panted softly in the passenger seat beside her. She could still feel Dr. Lewis's cold voice in her ears, like it had soaked into her skin. Her gut told her this wasn't just about rude comments or a bad experience, something about that office. That symbol half hidden on the desk, that offhand remark, it all pointed to something deeper. Something darker. She didn't know exactly what to say when the officer showed up. It wasn't illegal for someone to be rude, and Maya wasn't the type to overreact. But when she mentioned the patch behind the desk, the officer's face changed. He asked her to describe it again. She did. Slowly, carefully. His expression went flat. Serious. "You saw that inside the vet's clinic?" he asked, glancing toward the front door of the building like it had suddenly become something more than a place that cleaned dog teeth and clipped nails. "I didn't imagine it," Maya said. "And the way he treated us, me and my dog, it wasn't just bad service. He didn't even try to hide it." The officer nodded, but didn't say much else. Just told her to wait in her car for a bit while he checked things out. Maya didn't know what to expect. Maybe he'd walk in, talk to the man, come back and say it was all nothing. That's what usually happened. But 20 minutes passed, then 30. Then another squad car arrived. While she waited, Maya looked up Dr. Lewis on her phone. But there wasn't much. No social media. Just a few clinic reviews, most of them vague. A couple glowing, some saying he was a little strict, but knew what he was doing. Nothing that hinted at who he really was. But the more she searched, the more strange details she found. The clinic had changed hands just 4 months ago. Before that, it had been run by a husband and wife for over 20 years until they suddenly sold it and moved out of state. No farewell posts. No thank you messages to longtime clients. Just ... gone. Then she stumbled across a local news blog buried under layers of links. It mentioned a vet named Dr. Leonard Lewis, retired Army medic, decorated for service overseas, relocated to Georgia from Wyoming after personal reasons. The article was short, more of a welcome piece than an investigation, but one phrase stood out. A strong believer in tradition and discipline, Dr. Lewis says he hopes to bring his values to the community. Tradition and discipline. Maya stared at those words like they were code for something else. Her heart was still pounding. When the first officer finally returned to her window, he thanked her for the call, said they'd be looking into it, but his tone was guarded now, like he was measuring every word. She asked if they found anything. "Ma'am, we're going to do our due diligence," he said. "But you did?" "The right thing, reporting it." That was all. By the time Maya got home, her hands had stopped shaking, but her mind hadn't. She kept thinking about how many other people had gone to that clinic. How many might have missed the warning signs? Or worse, how many had been treated unfairly, silently, and just left, thinking it was all in their head? The vet's behavior, the subtle digs, the rough treatment of her dog, it could have been passed off as just another bad day. But that patch on the desk wasn't something you kept out in the open unless you believed no one would call you out. The next day, Maya told a few close friends what happened. Most were horrified. One of them, Alina, had taken her cat there a few weeks back and remembered feeling weird energy, though nothing specific had happened. She thought maybe she was just overthinking it at the time. Another friend, Marcus, worked with a local community organization and promised to dig a little deeper. He didn't trust small-town cover-ups, especially not in places where people looked the other way because it was easier. A few days later, he called her back. "You're not crazy," he said. "I found something." He forwarded an online forum thread buried deep in a niche dog breeding site. Had dozens of anonymous posts. Most were harmless, about diets and grooming routines. But one post was different. It was from someone using the handle OldVet62. And it mentioned Duke's exact symptoms: limping on the front left paw, inflamed pad, favoring the leg on stairs. What stopped Maya cold wasn't just the uncanny similarity to Duke, it was the tone of the post. It wasn't a medical question. It was more like mocking. She brought in a retriever. All soft, sweet, spoiled, typical. Told her I'd run a few tests. She left fast. Didn't even ask for meds. Maybe she saw the sign. Maya read the post 3 times before she spoke. This was about me. Marcus didn't say anything for a moment, then, looks like it. And that site, it's not just about animals. Some of the users, they're part of a group. Low-key, but organized. Quiet hatred dressed up as dog talk. The pieces were coming together, but it only made things worse. The clinic, the patch, the forum. What had started as a routine vet visit now felt like the opening of something. Bigger shadow hiding in plain sight. Maya wanted to warn people. She posted about her experience online, carefully, not naming names, but making it clear something felt wrong. Within hours, the comments poured in. Some were supportive, others were skeptical. A few were angry. One message stood out. It was from an anonymous profile. No picture, no name. Just a short, chilling line. "You should have kept your mouth shut." She didn't reply. She just stared at the screen, heart racing again. Maybe she had stirred something she wasn't prepared for. But at the same time, how could she walk away now? She hadn't imagined what she saw. She knew what she felt. And the more she dug, the more it seemed like she'd barely scratched the surface. A couple days later, someone rang her doorbell. She wasn't expecting anyone. Through the peephole, she saw a man in plain clothes holding a badge. "Ms. Thompson?" he asked when she opened the door. "Yes. I'm with the county investigator's office. We'd like to ask you a few questions about the vet clinic and what you saw that day." She nodded slowly, stepping aside to let him in. What she didn't know was that her story wasn't just being heard, now was being watched. And someone else, someone who didn't like being exposed, had already started tracking her every move. Maya's fight for answers was just beginning. The investigator's name was Paul Ramirez. He looked like someone who had seen too much and trusted too little. His tone was calm, but there was a certain alertness in the way his eyes scanned the room as Maya poured him a glass of water. Sat beside her, still limping slightly, and watched the stranger with cautious eyes. Paul started by asking her, to recount everything that happened during her visit to the clinic. Maya told him the story again, word for word, including the patch. Behind the desk, the harsh way Dr. Lewis handled Duke, and the chilling comments that didn't feel like coincidences. When she mentioned the online forum post, Paul leaned forward. "Do you still have a screenshot of that?" "I saved the whole page," Maya said, reaching for her laptop. He looked at the post closely, then typed something into his phone. "That? Handle lolled vet, 62 weave, seen it before. Shows up on forums we monitor. We can't always track these people, but sometimes they slip." "You're saying you already knew about him?" Maya asked, surprised. "We've had hints," he replied, "but no solid complaint. Nothing anyone wanted to risk pushing to fore until now." That unsettled her. She'd been thinking this whole thing was an isolated case, just her. But now it seemed like a bigger problem, one with layers and secrets most people never saw. If Dr. Lewis had ties to extremist groups, or even sympathized with them, how many other clients had unknowingly walked into danger? Paul didn't confirm anything, but he did say this: sometimes people like that hide behind uniforms, or behind a title. Vet, teacher, officer. It gives them cover. But they always leave trails, little things they think no one notices. Over the next few days, Maya started noticing things she hadn't before. A black SUV parked down the block from her house, always with tinted windows. A strange number of friend requests from blank profiles. Someone even emailed her from an address that didn't exist, the next to no message, just an attachment. She didn't open it. She forwarded everything to Paul, who told her not to panic, but to stay alert. And not to open anything from an unknown sender. He also sent a unit to drive past her house now and then, just to keep a presence. Still, every night, Maya triple-checked the locks and left a light on in every room. Meanwhile, Marcus continued digging. He found a former employee of the clinic, an older vet tech named Julianne, who had worked under the previous owners. She agreed to talk, but asked to meet at a diner 2 towns over. Maya and Marcus sat across from her at a back booth while the waitress poured coffee. Julianne looked tired, like someone who carried too much for too long. "Dr. Lewis came in fast," she said quietly. "Bought the place without asking too many questions." The owners were eager to sell. They didn't say why. But I heard rumors that someone had started threatening them after they refused to join some kind of local group. I thought it was gossip. But then they left. "Did you ever see anything?" Maya asked. Julianne nodded slowly. The first few weeks he kept to himself. But then strange men started visiting after hours. They didn't bring pets. They just went straight into the back office. Once I saw one of them carrying a crate. Swear I heard scratching inside. Like an animal, but when I asked about it, I was told to mind my business. She paused, her eyes shifting toward the window. "After that, I quit. I didn't feel safe." That confirmed what Maya had feared. The clinic wasn't just a cover for someone with bad opinions. Something else was going on inside, something that involved more than hateful speech. Something physical, hidden. Maya brought this information to Paul, who told her they were filing for a warrant, but the process took time. "We need more," he said. "Enough to prove this isn't just suspicion." And time was something Maya didn't feel like she had, especially after what happened next. Late one night, as she took Duke outside, she noticed her trash bins had been tipped over. It wasn't windy. She bent to pick them up when she noticed something sitting on the pavement. A manila envelope. No name, no return address. She looked around. No one was there. She brought it inside carefully, using gloves. Inside were 5 photographs. Grainy, low light, but clear enough to see the outline of Duke's face. All taken from behind fences, bushes outside her home. One photo showed her walking him, Another showed her through the front window, reading. The last one, her car parked in front of the clinic. There was no note, just the photos. She sat down slowly, her knees weak. Her phone slipped from her fingers onto the couch. She'd expected resistance, but not stalking, not threats this personal. She forwarded everything to Paul, who responded within minutes. Stay inside, lock everything. We're coming. The next morning, news started spreading online. A local blog posted an article. Anonymous tip claims animal clinic may be linked to underground hate group. The comments exploded. Some defended the clinic, others accused it. People were divided, shouting at each other virtually. But no one really knew the full truth. Yet, subplots were now branching out everywhere. One woman claimed she'd been fired from her job after posting her support for Maya's story. Another said she recognized the man from one of the photos Maya shared, with Paul claimed he had once worked security for a fringe political group in Texas. No one could prove anything, but people were talking. And for some, that was dangerous. That afternoon, Maya got a call from Julianne. They broke into my garage, she whispered, voice shaking. I didn't report it because they didn't take anything. Just rearranged things, like a message. Was no longer a theory. Someone wanted my and everyone connected to her to back off. Paul asked her to come downtown for an official statement. While there, he showed her something they'd pulled from the dog breeding forum. The same account that had mocked Hurled Vet 6 to had made another post. This one read, "Not all pests have 4 legs. Some bark louder. Time to remind them who runs the kennel." Maya sat in that gray interview room, the hum of the fluorescent lights above her loud in the silence. Her hands clenched together, her jaw tight. This wasn't just about her dog anymore. This was about power, about fear, about a man who had built a shield behind a clinic wall, hiding something rotten underneath it. And now that shield was starting to crack. But the danger hadn't passed. If anything, it was growing louder, bolder. Whatever was happening in that clinic, whatever was really being hidden, it wasn't going to stay buried much longer. And Maya wasn't backing down. The days that followed were a blur of caution and rising fear. Maya barely slept. Even Duke, usually the most relaxed dog on the block, had grown anxious, his ears perked at the smallest sounds. Pacing in circles by the window late at night. The sense of being watched never left her. Lights would flicker on outside for no reason. Her motion camera picked up figures just out of range, always gone by the time she checked. Every day felt heavier than the last. Paul checked in often. So did Marcus. But the police hadn't gotten their warrant yet. The process was slow, tied up in paperwork and legal red tape. And while the clock ticked, the clinic remained open. People still walked in and out, completely unaware of what might be happening behind the walls. Some in the community had started defending Dr. Lewis publicly, saying Maya's story was exaggerated or politically motivated. She became a target of online hate. Every time she spoke up, she was met with a flood of messages telling her to drop it or accusing her of trying to destroy a man's reputation. But deep down, she knew this wasn't about reputation. This was about safety. Something dark was festering beneath the surface, and nobody wanted to look too closely. One night, Marcus called her with urgency in his voice. "I found something," he said. "You remember that security company I told you about? The one the guy in your photo supposedly worked for? Well, one of their old employee rosters got leaked a few years ago. Guess what name was on it?" Maya barely breathed. Dr. Lewis, Leonard. R. Lewis. Hired under contract. Private ops. Not officially listed anywhere public, but the roster was confirmed by 2 different watchdog groups. And it gets worse. His assignment was in a facility known for underground training camps. She sat down, trying to process it all. "So he's not just a vet with bad views?" she asked. No, he's someone with training, with connections, and a past that no one bothered to ask about. That changed everything. If Dr. Lewis had military experience connected to extremist paramilitary groups, then what he was hiding wasn't just personal ideology, was potentially part of something bigger, something organized. And now Maya had poked it. Paul was furious that night, not at Maya, but at the delays, the bureaucracy, the way everything was moving like molasses while danger was clearly building. He promised her they were close. But close wasn't good enough then. Something happened that pushed everything to the edge. Julianne, who had gone mostly quiet for her own safety, was found unconscious in her driveway. No witnesses, no security camera footage. Her car was still running. She'd been struck from behind, hard. They said it wasn't fatal, but she might not wake up for days. Paul visited the hospital personally. When he came back, his voice was tight with urgency. "We're done waiting." That same night, a small team prepared for a covert surveillance operation on the clinic. They had no warrant to enter yet, but they could monitor. They'd set up equipment down the street, out of sight. Maya watched from her own living room as unmarked vans pulled into a neighbor's driveway the house temporarily borrowed for the setup. For the first time, she wasn't just the witness. She was part of the operation. At 2:14 a.m., movement. A car pulled into the clinic's back lot, no lights, no sound. A man got out, carrying something wrapped in cloth. Then another figure emerged from the clinic's rear door, letting him in. The footage was grainy, but clear enough. It wasn't a client, and it wasn't a normal delivery. It looked like something being hidden. Paul called her immediately. "We got visual. They're doing something inside." "What do you think it is?" she asked. "No clue. But this may be what we need to push the warrant." But Maya couldn't sit still anymore. Her heart was pounding, her mind spinning with questions. What were they doing in there in the middle of the night? What was so urgent, so secret? It had to be carried in like that. Later that morning, Maya took a drive, not because she wanted to be near the clinic, but because she couldn't stop herself. She drove past slowly, barely glancing out the window, just enough to see. The front looked normal, quiet, the kind of place you'd never think twice about. But behind those walls, something unnatural was happening. And if nobody stopped it soon, more people could get hurt. When she got home, a box was waiting on her. Porch, no markings, no label. Just her name, scrawled in black marker. Her chest tightened. She didn't touch it. She called Paul immediately. "Don't go near it," he said. "We're sending a team." When they arrived and opened it with gloves and protective gear, what they found sent chills through everyone there. Inside was a muzzle one meant for a dog Duke's size. But it had been burned, edges melted, charred black. Next to it was a note, "We train animals differently where I'm from." It's no signature, just that it was a threat. A direct message. And it meant someone had been watching closely enough to know Duke's size, Brett and Maya's exact address. No more games. Paul looked at her after the team left. This isn't just intimidation anymore. They're escalating. But it didn't stop Maya. If anything, it made her more determined. She contacted a journalist she trusted, someone who had covered stories like this before and knew how to ask the right questions. Together, they started gathering evidence, pulling timelines, connecting dots. They didn't go public yet, but they were ready. The tension kept building. Rumors started spreading in the neighborhood. People whispered about the clinic, about the police cars, about Maya. Some neighbors avoided her. Others quietly supported her. But nobody really knew how deep it went. And just when she thought things couldn't get more intense, Marcus disappeared. He had gone to meet a contact, someone who claimed to have inside info about Dr. Lewis's past. He texted Maya before the meeting, said he'd call after. He never did. Hours passed. His phone went straight to voicemail. His car was found abandoned near an old industrial lot. No signs of struggle, but also no sign of Marcus. Maya's world tilted again. Now, it wasn't just suspicion. It wasn't just fear. Someone close to her had vanished. And the man behind it, all still wearing a white coat, still treating pets, was walking free. Maya stood in her kitchen that night, lights off, windows locked, staring at the dark street outside. Her phone buzzed beside her. No caller ID. She picked it up slowly. A voice, low and cold, spoke 2 words. Back off. Then silence. She didn't sleep that night, because deep down, she knew this was only the beginning of the end. The phone call echoed in Maya's mind long after the line went dead. Back off. Just 2 words, but spoken with enough venom to make her blood run cold. She sat frozen, the phone still in her hand, every nerve in her body alert. It wasn't just a warning. It was a promise. And the silence that followed it felt heavier than any scream. By morning, there was still no word from Marcus. The police were now treating it as a possible abduction, though they hadn't officially released anything to the public. Paul tried to reassure her, said they were expanding the search, checking surveillance footage, cross-referencing calls. But nothing concrete had come up. And Maya couldn't shake the feeling that someone had silenced him to send her a message. Later that day, she met Paul at the precinct. He looked exhausted, the kind of tired that lives behind the eyes. "We've submitted everything we have to the judge," he told her. "The footage, the threats, the box. After what happened to Marcus, we might finally get the green light." Maya nodded. "You think Lewis is behind this?" Paul didn't answer right away. If he's not doing it directly, he knows who is. Before she left, Paul pulled her aside. "There's something else. I wasn't going to tell you yet, but I think you deserve to know." He handed her a file. Inside were photos, blurry, night vision stills taken during the surveillance on the clinic. One of them showed the man from the rear entrance again, the same one carrying the cloth-covered object. But another photo showed something far more disturbing. A group of people gathered in the clinic's back room, no pets, no medical gear in sight, just a folding table, dim lighting, and something drawn on the wall. A symbol. It was the same one Maya had seen partially hidden on Dr. Lewis's desk. But now, fully visible. Not just a hate symbol. It was tied to an underground network, a fringe group flagged by the FBI years ago for organizing through hidden channels, often under the cover of businesses that wouldn't raise suspicion. Clinics, gun shops, rural churches, places no one looked too hard at. "This isn't just racism," Paul said. "This is coordinated. They're using this place for meetings, maybe more." Maya stared at the image. "And you still don't have the warrant?" "We will," he said. "But there's another angle you need to hear about." She didn't expect what came next. One of the messages, Maya had. An anonymous tip that seemed like spam at first had been flagged by cybersecurity. It contained encrypted data. Paul's team had cracked it the night before. It led to a hidden drive full of internal documents, maps, names, notes about surveillance targets. And on one of the pages, a name Maya hadn't heard in years. Her brother's. Jason Thompson. A former community organizer in North Carolina, once arrested during a peaceful protest for police reform. Maya hadn't spoken to him in over 5 years. They'd drifted after he moved overseas. But his name showing up in that file changed everything. "I don't understand," she said, staring at the paper. "What does Jason have to do with this?" "We're not sure," Paul replied. "But it looks like this group had tabs on him. And not just him, other activists, journalists, even a few lawyers. It's like they were building a list of people they saw as threats. The clinic was just a piece of it. The realization hit Maya hard. This wasn't about her dog anymore. It wasn't even just about the threats or Marcus's disappearance. It was about a network operating under everyone's noses, watching, recording, organizing. And her family was somehow tied into it. When she got home, Maya called every number she had for Jason. None worked. His old email bounced back. She didn't know where he lived now, or if he even knew he was on some list. But she had to try. Meanwhile, something else was unraveling quietly. A former patient at the clinic, a single mother named Delia, had reached out to Maya after seeing her post online. She claimed that a month ago, her dog had undergone a routine procedure at Dr. Lewis's clinic. But afterward, something changed. The dog, once playful and affectionate, became skittish and withdrawn. She'd taken him to another vet who found a small incision that hadn't been documented anywhere on his chart. No one knew what had been inserted or removed. "I thought it was just an accident," Delia said, tears in her eyes. "But now I'm not so sure." Maya passed the information to Paul, and suddenly everything was moving faster. The clinic was no longer just a suspected hate group meeting site. Now there was possible evidence of medical tampering. Maybe experiments, maybe tracking. No one could say yet. But the pieces were stacking. That night, Maya received a message from a blocked number. "You think you're getting close, but you've already crossed the line." Your brother didn't listen either. She stared at the screen, pulse racing. It wasn't just about silencing her anymore. They were using Jason to get inside her head. And it was working. But then one more twist. Early the next morning, Maya's neighbor knocked on her door. She was a quiet woman, rarely spoke more than a hello. But this time, her face was pale, her hands trembling. "I think I need to tell you something," she whispered. She had been out walking late the night Marcus went missing. She didn't want to get involved before, but guilt had been eating at her. That night, she saw two men pull Marcus into a van near the alley behind the pharmacy. One of them was wearing a jacket with the clinic's logo on it. Maya didn't say anything, just closed her eyes, heart thudding so hard it made her feel dizzy. The walls were closing in, but the truth was closer than ever. And somewhere out there, Marcus was still missing. Jason's name was buried in enemy files. And a suburban animal clinic was hiding something far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. The air was heavy with silence as Maya sat in the back of the unmarked vehicle with Paul, parked 2 blocks from the clinic. The judge had finally approved the warrant. Armed with the surveillance footage, the threatening messages, and the new witness testimony from Maya's neighbor, the task force was ready. This time, they weren't just watching, they were going in. It was 4:47 a.m. when the first officer signaled. A small team approached the clinic from both sides. Their movements were sharp and quiet, the early morning fog making everything feel even more unreal. Maya watched through a pair of binoculars, heart hammering against her ribs, her hands clenched tight in her lap. Paul kept his radio low, listening to the team's updates. Rear door secured. Entering, the silence on the radio stretched thin until the next voice crackled in. Main room clear. Moving to the back. Then another pause. We've got a concealed room, hidden door behind the supply shelf. Breaching. Paul stiffened beside her. His eyes locked on the radio like it could shatter. Then came the words that confirmed everything. Maya feared and suspected. We found it. The officer didn't elaborate right away, but the coded words were enough. They had discovered the hidden space, a makeshift meeting room, low light, strange markings on the wall, and stacks of documents, names, locations, flagged individuals. Duke's name was even scribbled on a folder alongside Maya's. But what stunned them most were the containers. Locked metal crates stacked along the back wall. Inside, they found microchip scanners, data drives, and unregistered medical tools. Paul's face turned pale as the updates came in. This wasn't just a hate group meeting spot. It was a covert data harvesting operation. Animals brought into the clinic were being used as test subjects, not for science, but for tracking. Select. Pets were implanted with chips that broadcasted not just the pet's location, but also cross-referenced it with the home's occupants. Maya's suspicions about Duke's strange behavior were confirmed. He'd been tagged. And then, just when they thought they'd unraveled the worst, came the voice over the radio that made Maya's stomach drop. "We've got a live hostage." The officers found Marcus, alive, chained in a basement storage area, dehydrated and bruised, but breathing. His eyes blinked against the flashlight glare as he mumbled Maya's name. She broke into tears the second Paul relayed the message. Marcus was going to be okay. He was found just in time. Dr. Lewis, however, was nowhere to be found. His car was still in the back. His coat hung on the wall, but the man himself had vanished. No signs of a struggle, no blood. Just gone. Maya stood outside the clinic as the sun finally began to rise. The building, once so ordinary, looked different now exposed. Officers moved in and out carrying bags of evidence. The press had already started arriving. Cameras, microphones, questions. But Maya didn't care about any of that in that moment. She cared about Marcus, sitting on the gurney getting checked by medics. She cared about Duke, now resting safely in her car. And she cared that after all the threats, the gaslighting, and the fear she was right, Paul joined her, arms crossed, his voice low. They'll find him. He won't get far. But something didn't sit right. As they reviewed security footage from earlier that morning, a shocking frame appeared. A man in scrubs, walking out the back door 2 hours before the raid, carrying a black duffel bag. The timestamp read 2:29 a.m., minutes before the final warrant approval came through. They zoomed in. The face was blurry, but the build, the gait. It was Dr. Lewis, and he hadn't left alone. Walking beside him, wearing a baseball cap, pulled low and sunglasses, was another man. Tall, lean, confident stride. Paul leaned closer. "Do we know him?" Maya's heart nearly stopped. She leaned forward, trying to get a better look. And that's when the final twist hit her like a blow to the chest. The face under that capit was Jason, her brother. The image froze on the screen. Paul looked at her, confused. "You recognize him?" She nodded slowly, her voice nearly gone. "That's my brother." The room went quiet. Jason Thompson, the activist, the one she thought had disappeared off the grid, had walked out of the clinic with the very man she'd spent weeks trying to expose. And he hadn't been forced. He walked like he knew exactly what he was doing. Later that week, federal authorities took over the investigation. The raid made headlines. Dozens of files were uncovered tying the clinic to an underground network data. Scraping, surveillance, and extremist activity spread across multiple states. But one question remained unanswered. Why was Jason involved? Paul told Maya not to jump to conclusions. There could be a reason. Undercover work. Blackmail. But deep down, Maya couldn't ignore the look on her brother's face in that grainy image. Calm, intentional. Like he wasn't running from something, but toward it. She stood alone in her living room days later. Duke curled up by her feet, watching the sunset from the window. The fear was fading, but something colder had taken its place. The truth was out. The clinic had been shut down. Marcus was recovering, and Maya had done what most people wouldn't have dared to do, but the man behind it all had vanished. And the brother she thought she knew had walked away with him. Some stories don't end with justice. It's tied in a bow. Some end with the realization that the deepest betrayal comes from the ones we thought we could trust. And somewhere out there, behind. Another door, another mask. The next chapter had already begun. Weeks passed, and still no trace of Dr. Lewis or Jason. The FBI opened an official investigation, confirming that the clinic had been used as part of a larger domestic surveillance ring. It had roots in several states, some of which operated under the cover of legitimate businesses, vet clinics, security firms, even pet shelters. It was a chilling discovery, and Maya had helped uncover the first real crack in a wall most people didn't even know existed. The media storm eventually settled, but her life had changed permanently. People she'd never met sent letters of support. Some told their own stories about strange vet visits, dogs that came home different, feeling watched but never having proof. Her inbox was full of quiet confessions and cautious gratitude. But even through the gratitude, a hollow feeling stayed in her chest. She wasn't afraid anymore, but she wasn't whole either. Not after everything that had come to light. Marcus stayed with her for a while as he recovered. He didn't talk much about what happened in that basement, but sometimes she'd find him staring at nothing, clenching his fists unconsciously. He told her one thing. There had been others. People who had gone missing or nearly disappeared because they had been too close. Whatever Lewis was part of, he said, it ran deep. And I think Jason's in it, willingly. That was the part Maya couldn't make peace with. Her brother had always been principled, strong, outspoken. After the protests, after his arrest, he'd said he needed space, wanted to leave the country, reset. But now she wondered if something else had happened. If he'd been pulled into something when he was vulnerable, or worse, if he'd chosen this path himself. The encrypted files had hinted at him being watched. Yes, but maybe it hadn't ended there. Maybe someone had convinced him that this new way of thinking, this twisted mission, was righteous. She spent long nights replaying their last phone calls, rereading old messages. There were no obvious signs, no red flags. Just her brother, slowly fading out of her life while she got busy with work, with Duke, with the rhythm of everyday living. It hurt to think she could have missed something that important. But the truth was, people change. Sometimes without making a sound. The authorities assured her they'd keep her updated if Jason surfaced. For now, he was considered missing, possibly aiding a fugitive. A case number, a file. Another cold thread in a story that didn't want to close. Still, Maya kept going. She took Duke back to the vet. This time, a new clinic, a Black-owned practice, that treated Duke with care and dignity from the minute they walked through the door. Duke was healing well, physically at least. And for Maya, something about that simple visit reminded her of what had started this whole journey. Just a limp. Just a dog. Just a gut feeling that something wasn't right. She started speaking out more quietly, carefully. Not chasing headlines, but attending small town halls, community meetings, dog owner groups. She talked about safety, trust, and how appearances could be deceiving. She reminded people to ask questions even when they feel silly, especially when they feel silly. Because sometimes the biggest red flags hide in plain sight. Her story picked up again. A few months later, when a national journalist ran a deep dive article about the network of hidden surveillance clinics, Maya was mentioned by name, not as a victim but as the woman who cracked open a door everyone else had ignored. They didn't sensationalize it. They told it how it was. She appreciated that. Julianne eventually woke up. Her memory was foggy, but she confirmed one more thing. There had been files, names of children, pet owners, even social workers. None of it made sense to her at the time, but she remembered Lewis saying, "We need to know who's in which house." That one sentence, shared by someone brave enough to speak again, helped paint a clearer picture of the network's intent. It wasn't just about ideology. It was about control. The deeper investigators dug, the more they found. Not everyone involved had the same reasons. Some were just people trying to protect a way of life. Others were more radical, dangerous, but they all worked in silence, and they all believed no one would ever see through the mask. But Maya had. There were nights she still sat on the porch, sipping tea, Duke sleeping at her feet, wondering if she'd ever see Jason again. If maybe, someday, he'd reach out. If maybe he wasn't as lost as she feared. But even if he didn't, she knew what she had to do with the rest of her life. Keep shining light in quiet places. Keep asking uncomfortable questions. And keep reminding others that courage doesn't always look loud. It often begins with a whisper. A choice. A question nobody else is asking. The town eventually moved on, as towns often do. The clinic was boarded up, the sign taken down. People walked their dogs past it without stopping. A new business was rumored to open there soon. Maya didn't pay it much mind. That building had taken enough from her. She didn't need to watch it get repainted. One day, about 8 months after it all began, she received a small envelope in the mail. No return address, no markings. Inside was a single photograph, an old one. It was her and Jason sitting on the front porch of their childhood home, laughing. Duke as a puppy in Jason's lap. On the back was a handwritten note. I did what I had to. I hope one day you'll understand. Keep him safe. There was no name. But she knew the handwriting. She stared at the photo for a long time. It didn't answer everything. It didn't fix anything. But it was something. Proof that her brother was still out there. Still watching, maybe even protecting her in his own broken way. It didn't mean she forgave him, but it meant he hadn't disappeared completely, and in a story full of shadows. That small flicker of truth was enough to let her exhale. Maya folded the note, placed it in a box with the others' memories. Evidence, reminders. She stood up, called Duke over, and grabbed his leash. There was still work to do in the world, still people out there trying to hide behind quiet walls. But she'd seen what was possible when someone refused to back down, and from that day forward, Maya Thompson walked a little taller, not because she wanted attention, not because she wasn't still afraid, but because she understood something most people never do sometimes. The smallest moment can change everything, and all it takes is one person who chooses to look closer.